Welcome to another episode of ROL Radio. Today's guest, along with numerous other achievements, is an IBJJF Pans Champion and an IBJJF World NoGI Champion, as well as a UAEJJF U.S. National Pro and Grand Slam Champion. But he may be best known for helping to carry on his family's love and knowledge of what they created, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. On this episode, we have the son of Carley and the grandson of Carlos, the one and only Clark Gracie. Listen as Clark tells stories of traveling back and forth from San Francisco to Brazil as a child, what it means to carry on the family legacy, creating his own legacy, and what he believes the jiu-jitsu lifestyle really means. Here is ROL Radio with the creator of Gracie Allegiance, Clark Gracie.
Welcome to ROL Radio.
All right, we're live. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing great. Super excited about this one today. I think when people see the posts for this one coming up, they're going to be really excited too. So I think we're going to have a good time here.
Clark, welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks
Good
for
to see you again.
having us.
It's been a few months since you and I chatted and saw each other. How are things going in California?
Things are, a little different, of course. I think I saw you in like January. We're in June now, and just jumped over this whole pandemic, and hopefully this doesn't restart again. Get that second wave. But yeah, it's been like some crazy different times, right? With jiu-jitsu just basically, almost completely shutting down. Surprisingly, they still have some tournaments, some events going. Not tournaments, but just like those super fights. But yeah.
How is your academy doing during this unusual time?
A lot of people are suffering, right? Because they lost their jobs, spouses lose their jobs, or they just don't feel like they can pay if they can't keep their membership if they're not coming. So, which is understandable, but luckily, we're okay. We got through it. We just reopened a week ago, so we're all super excited about that. Are you guys open again?
Not yet.
Not yet. We're getting close, but not just yet. But I'm hearing your kids' classes are starting soon.
We're starting next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Kind of gave it just another week delay for the kids, just to kind of get a feel for how things were going and make sure everything was kind of going smooth, see what people wanted, what people were comfortable with, and then we're going to throw the kids back in. But we're going to try to do it with a no contact class at first and just see how that goes, kind of ask the parents what they think and just go from there.
Yeah, so when we we were talking earlier, you were saying you wanted to open as safely as possible. And are you doing no contact with adults too? Or are you just going to feel that out with the kids and see how it goes next week?
Yeah, I'm doing 2 classes a week with no contact. So it's basically everything that we do in like the warm-ups, but we're staying in the same place, kind of like a boot camp fitness class kind of thing,
Cool.
They have their area, and it's actually really tough. It's actually tougher than the class. Like I'll finish like just beat because I'll put them through like a good workout, and we'll do like a Tabata system, some kind of like mostly body weight stuff or all body weight stuff. And everything that we do in the warm-ups, just we're getting like high reps and just really working the endurance, And I think it's great. Something I'd like to actually continue just as a conditioning and fitness. But, mainly for the reason to make sure people feel comfortable coming back. If they don't want to have contact with anyone, if they don't have a family member that they can come train with, or, they want to train on a dummy or whatever, they can do something like that,
Yeah, well, it's good just to get out of the house, right? Get back to
yeah.
And then with all the body resistance stuff, and when sparring starts up again, you won't have people cashing out all over the place, right? They'll be in some sort of shape after taking 3 months off.
Exactly, yeah. Kind of bring people back slowly.
Right. Nice. I like it.
So slow comeback for you and your academy. And and the kids are coming in. So listen, I think you are one of those unique individuals in jiu-jitsu community that has, active connection with the old school community way back in Brazil, simply because of connection with your father. And I know you creating this organization now, Gracie Alliance. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that fits into what your dad started here? I mean, decades ago at this point.
Yeah, it's something I'm really excited about because it's I've been, like a lot of people in my family, just representing my name, Clark Gracie team, Clark Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy, for years. But I really want to build something that's bigger than myself, and something that will go on after me, and just kind of have a broader umbrella. So I created with my father the Gracie Allegiance. So we're all together, we're kind of like the name Allegiance, representing loyalty, brotherhood, coming together, and as a team, as a community, but not with so many restrictions like some other franchises may have. So, but still with the same mentality, the same point of view. And yeah, you're right. I feel like I have like that touch into modern jiu-jitsu still. A lot of people would say like, oh, you have like a modern sport jiu-jitsu game. But, I feel like I have a really strong connection with, like you said, the older school jiu-jitsu game, the self-defense side of jiu-jitsu, which I think is kind of fading away. And yeah, I think it's important that we preserve, all the sides of jiu-jitsu, and everything that works, which has worked for years and been proven. I mean, it's you see Royce going to the UFC, in the mid '90s, and all he did was jiu-jitsu. He didn't do any kickboxing, he didn't do anything. And the guys who was fighting, they didn't do any ground. So I mean, you see the art as the pure art at that time, with those early MMA days, and how effective it was. Now people know jiu-jitsu. They know what a triangle is. They know how to avoid, arm bars and stuff like that. Things change a little bit. Everybody's cross training, but I just want to preserve, what jiu-jitsu is, and also preserve, the idea of just jiu-jitsu as a lifestyle, jiu-jitsu as a healthy philosophy, state of mind, and community.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And again, as sport evolves, and as we kind of continue going forward, often we forget the past or the beginning of this entire sport, and self-defense and the community and all of this. And again, you have this direct connection to your dad that often doesn't exist, and not actively, at least. There's only a handful of individuals like yourself. Do you have any recollections? And obviously you were born in the US, but I know you traveled quite a bit between Brazil and US when you were younger. Do you have any recollections, like how all this was back in Brazil, when you were much younger?
I'm sorry, how what was?
How life was, how your family was, and how things were when you were traveling back and forth between US and Brazil.
Yeah, I lived in Brazil for like my high school years, and I remember just like the family was all still there, when I was younger. Nowadays, everybody's pretty much like found a better place to make money with jiu-jitsu than Brazil, most of them. But yeah, back then I think the family was maybe a little bit tighter, a little bit closer. People even living together. My dad tells stories about how his father had a house. Carlos Gracie had a house of 28 bedrooms, and
28.
Yeah, man. I think that is all on the real.
That's 25 more than I have.
And he had 21 children, so big house. But times were different, and but sounds like just something crazy stories, like a lot of crazy stories about family members, and just these kind of things you don't hear about them being common anymore. People having this big of a families, and even my own family, is not that much to compare like to something of the way my dad grew up. you know. So it's a lot of stories, and to be that everyone is doing at least a little bit of jiu-jitsu, right? And all the boys, you know, I believe everybody pretty much got to black belt, you know, all my dad's brothers. So being very competitive, and at that time, you know, that no one really knew jiu-jitsu, and to be just like, you know, imagine like if no one knew jiu-jitsu and just you knew jiu-jitsu, how powerful you would feel. You know what I mean? Plus, not only that, but Carlos Gracie created a diet called the Gracie diet that just kept everybody very healthy, in top shape. You know, so the combination between doing jiu-jitsu every day, being in this competitive family, which is pretty competitive. You know, they say leave your ego at the door, be humble in jiu-jitsu. But in this family, it's not really that way, you know. But of course, it's a good way to approach jiu-jitsu. But from what
It takes a sibling rivalry to a different level, right? I don't think if you're not living in that lifestyle, I don't think siblings really know what it's like to compete against each other. I'm sure it's a lot different.
And not just brother and sister, but like cousins, and you know, like there was Elio's side of the family. I mean, Carlos and Elios, all their children, and they all jiu-jitsu focused, you know. And then everybody wants to have their own academy, and you know, some people get along, some people don't, you know what I mean? But now I think everybody's kind of getting along well, and everybody's kind of accepts, you know, that they can each have their, you know, piece.
Who was your typical training partner back then, in your teens, when you were living there?
I trained a lot with my uncle Helion, of course, with my father. My father was the person I trained with the most. But I mean, you know, in my family training partner, I didn't really have like people in my family training partners, sparring partners until adulthood, until my like early 20s. You know, I would visit their schools, my uncle's schools, and you know, always pick up a little bit, and very nice to always be welcome. You know, like I was always welcome at the Gracie Baja headquarters in Rio, and then another uncle Helion, who's now in Miami, had a school in Rio as well that I would train at quite a bit, and you know, my dad would just connect me with people, so it was good.
Way back in the day, when you were in your teens, did you really know the magnitude of the family and the impact that all of you guys will be making in the future? Like, did that really sink in your head what you were part of, or did that come a little bit later in life?
You know, I did, because when I was like 10 years old, the UFC was starting, and I remember going to watch and thinking like, man, this is my family, and I'll be there one day. You know what I mean? Like in the ring, you know, at some level, be competing and representing, and just growing up with the stories, and you know, with all the influence of my father and his brothers, like just being around and talking about it, and I really think, you know, it's amazing. It's not just jiu-jitsu. I really think the men in my family have a very influential character, vibe, you know, like you can even see like how much guys like Helson, Hickson, Carlson, my father, you know, like they all talk about their fathers, you know. It's like they don't talk about themselves that much. They talk about their fathers a ton. And my father talked about his father a lot as well, you know, like there's just like a lot to say, you know, a lot of stories. You know?
What are some good things that you remember about your grandfather, your dad's dad?
Yeah, I mean, my connection with him was limited because living in the U.S. when I was around that age, I came to visit a few times, saw him there, but you know, he passed away when I was 10 years old. So, you know, my connection personally was like limited, but it was more just like the stories, you know, the legendary stories.
Legendary.
I think the biggest thing that like made a mark, you know, it wasn't the diet or the jiu-jitsu, it was the approach, the attitude, the personality. You know, my dad has like countless stories about how his father, who, you know, the famous story is Carlos Gracie and Elio, both of them, they weren't like big guys, they weren't like really, you know, scary, intimidating people, but they could take care of these guys that were, you know, much bigger than them, much stronger, intimidating guys. Like, and you see like a guy like Hoist, when he did that and inspired everyone in the early days. But it wasn't about like being mean or being intimidating or being like the toughest guy or anything like that. It was about how Carlos could, like, because he had so much confidence and so much control of his own energy and what was going to happen to him, he could diffuse the situation. You know, he could come to someone who was very upset or someone that wanted to fight him, you know, someone who was being aggressive to him, and have incredible self-control and calm the guy down, you know, or stop the guy from beating him up, you know. But like how would most people, the average person, especially who doesn't train jiu-jitsu, react when someone acts aggressively to them, when someone pushes them, steps on their foot, spits in their face, curses at them? They're going to get upset, you know what I mean? They get emotional, they lose control of their emotions, and they act through just pure emotion and feeling. But to be able, and I think jiu-jitsu, not everyone taps into this, but jiu-jitsu is incredible in the way that if you utilize it, if you tap into it appropriately, jiu-jitsu is a way that you can control the emotions that you put out. Why? Because someone comes and does something aggressive to you, you know what you're capable of. You train probably with every different size of human being on the planet, you know, and you're you build this confidence within you. So he, from the stories I hear, he seems like he mastered that very well, you know, whether the guy's attacking him already physically or the guy's, you know, trying to start an altercation with him. And I think that comes back to just, you know, everyone relates things to be on the mat, you know, like in jiu-jitsu, right? Like the philosophy, bring it to the street, bring it to the mat. If you're a black belt and you don't have control of your emotions on the mat, you know, or whatever belt you are, you're going to get caught, right? You see white belts coming out and they're saying, okay, I'm just going to go as hard as I can the entire time until I win because I'm tough, I'm a badass, whatever. But if you think about sparring, you have to sometimes be patient. You have to sometimes wait for that right moment. You have to kind of play a little bit of even mind games with your opponent a little bit, get tricky, use strategies to come out in the end victoriously in whatever position or through submission you can. And if you can take that now into your relationship with your family, into relationship at work, the people around you, and not let your emotions take control of you, but you become in control of your emotions, which I think we have to do. We learn to do from white to black belt, from white to, you know, maybe at purple belt, we should have a good understanding of this already. I think, like, we can't just be a pure aggression, right? We have to control our movements, you know, and wait for timing, wait for the setup, wait for, you know, the right moment. So I think it's really interesting, this, you know.
Yeah, I think Thomas and I talk about it a lot, how it carries over to your everyday life, and not even like in a physical sense, but how it changes how you. For me, it changed how I talk to my wife, my family, how I approach, you know, the day job that I had when I first started training, and how it helps you maneuver through day to day in a way that if you're not training, I don't think you can achieve. Or I mean, you can achieve it, but I think it's something that you have to work at. And I think when you take what you learn on the mat and the struggles you've been through home and process it, it makes all the decision making in your day to day a lot easier. And you can control things in ways that, you know, you never thought you could, right? And you can set up situations so that, you know, whatever you're dealing with probably is going to come out positively instead of, you know, having a negative outcome for you. So it's just the way it's affected me, at least.
Yeah. I think what's cool about all of this is that, Clark, what you're talking about is, you know, average person stepping on the mat for the very first time, you know, they do experience this sense of anxiety and not knowing what's going on and trying to go through this discovery process. And over time, they learn to control their emotions, to be strategic, to troubleshoot, to resolve problems, you know, and that all that is on the mat. And often as black belts or as instructors, we talk about take this and apply this towards your life, which what Gary's talking about. But I think what's really hitting me is that your grandfather was doing this decades ago. And we are literally learning the same thing, maybe different techniques, different styles, but the same concepts, same principles today.
Right.
It's just mind-blowing to me.
I know you wanted to hear some stories. Like, I remember one story that stand out to me is like, my dad told a story about Carlos was walking on the sidewalk, and I think he was distracted or something, accidentally bumped into a guy that was carrying fruit. He was a worker at a supermarket. He was carrying like boxes of food back and forth from like the truck to the supermarket. He bumped into the guy. The guy dropped everything all over the floor. Everything was, fell over. And the guy became so furious that Carlos had bumped into him that he immediately attacked Carlos, and now, I don't know, this is Brazil. People like, at that time, maybe are a little bit more explosive or not so scared of like, going to jail from fighting. But it seemed like people fought a lot more, and you would think like that wouldn't necessarily happen here, although of course it can these days. But I was told that he attacked Carlos, without saying anything, just went for it, and Carlos was able to defend, block, throw him down, put him down, without throwing a punch, mounted on the guy who was attacking him physically, and just after mounting him said, hey man, put his hand on his face, like, calm down, like, sorry about that, basically apologizing to the guy that's like physically attacking him. It was both of them it was an accident for both of them, right? I mean, accidentally bumped into him, the guy got upset, he reacted. But then I guess the funny part of that story is that the guy, I guess somehow found out who he was later on. And I believe he maybe came to the academy later and started learning. But he said, the guy became, a story about it, because he said, man, I would have been much happier if Carlos had hit me in the face that day instead of just tapping me on the face and like treating me like a child, and the guy, showing so much self-control, and
Hey, is that a reason why when you watch these old tapes of Gracie challenges, they never hit it with closed fists, they always just slap? Is that connected?
Look, I think there's some connection there, but I'll tell you, like, I think my philosophy on that, my theory of that is probably, it's not because like, okay, let's kick this guy's ass, like they're going to do in the UFC. It's because I have so much confidence that they're going to win. Like if you guys were going to fight, you guys doing jiu-jitsu were going to fight, imagine yourself in those days, you would do the same, you would take care of the situation, no problem. But you want to prove a point, right? And a lot of times those guys that they fought, if you see like those old videos of Gracie in action videos, those guys would come back for round 2, round 3, right? And if this was really MMA and the guy's trying to, like the Taekwondo guys, the karate guys are trying to punch him, whoever these guys, these uncles of mine were. And these guys are slapping them back, not to make damage, not to cut their face, not to make them bleed, not to make them pass out necessarily. Just to show that, hey, I could hit you, because they want these guys probably to become students, right? and not they want them to become students and maybe let them try again, because the point was not to just like, I could beat up everybody. The point is to show jiu-jitsu technique really works, and you want to try it again, we'll try it again, but I can show you again and again until you decide to become a student and start to learn what we can teach you here, right? And
yeah, no, that's a lesson. That's for sure. I mean, yeah. I would not want to be on the other end.
Yeah, if you're on the other end, the guys, you're trying to punch the guy, and the guy's, petting your face, slapping your face to make you calm down.
Yeah, it's a little. I'm sure it could be a little frustrating.
But it shows an incredible amount of self-control too, right? Because you're not letting your emotions take control, and like, this guy's trying to kill me, I'm going to try to kill him. So
yeah, you're self-assured. You're confident in what you can do, and you don't have anything to prove. I think a lot of altercations, somebody's got something to prove. There's an agenda, right? And it's when you know jiu-jitsu on that level, I'm sure that it's just, I can do this all day, and I'm here to in a way, you know, the person that you're going against, you're there to help them in a way, you know, and, as weird as that might seem, to show them that what you're doing is superior. Come along, right? Maybe, like you said, they want them to join, come over to this side, you know, and I can show you without being so super aggressive about it, right? And doing any real damage. I think that's pretty commendable too.
How is your dad doing, by the way?
My dad's doing well. He's doing good. He's enjoying his life. I think, you know, he's teaching half the time, half of his week, and the other times focus on just, you know, his home and the land over there. He loves to plant things. And
Does he travel back to Brazil, or he's mostly here in US?
You know, not traveling as much these days, but I think he only really goes when he has to. But he still goes, like, probably a couple times a year.
Yeah, I mean, I had the privilege, you know, this is actually a funny story. I had the privilege to be his uki when he was at Team Rezovic in Chicago a few months back, 6 or 8 months ago. And I did not, and this is not the first time I've met your father, but I did not realize how strong he is. Like, he was showing headlock escapes and my head was literally popping out. Like,
Yeah, it's like very dense, right? So many years of making grips, man. Just like,
I cannot imagine, like, actually training with him. I was really, really surprised.
yeah, I think one of the first seminars, if not the first seminar he did in Chicago with your guys' team at Chicago Rezovic Academy, he was showing, like, one of the first techniques he even showed was like a guillotine escape or something. And he grabbed under the guy's hips and just picked him up and put him down. I was like, whoa, like, this guy, you know, this red belt older gentleman over here is just like picking up Adam Rezovic or one of these guys, whoever it was. And
it's so funny because he's so calm and he talks very slow and he has all these stories that he tells, and then boom.
yeah, they can get some funny and very intense stories.
Yeah, hey, listen, I remember you recording your dad when he was telling stories, like at the dinner and other things. Do you still do this? Do you try to collect all that?
Wow, but yeah, there was a time I was thinking, man, you know, these stories are gonna just fade away and disappear. Like, I gotta get it on camera, or somehow record it. You know, it's kind of hard to pin my dad down and say, like, hey, let's do a documentary or write a book or something like that. Guys have tried, you know, and it's a little bit hard to make him commit to something like that.
He's not interested in that, huh? He's just a storyteller.
Yeah.
How do you think training in the US is different from training in Brazil over time, right? So obviously you have pretty good knowledge of what's going on in both countries. You very, very versed in Jiu Jitsu itself, very good instructor, well-established association with your own academy. How do you think what the differences are between both of the countries and both of the places of training?
Well, first of all, just, you know, the first thing you might notice if you go train in Brazil, especially if you go to Rio, you're going to feel like the humidity, and you're just going to leave no matter what. Like, if you just do even just a couple rounds or even just do technique, your gi is going to be soaked. And that's like a kind of a game changer. At least I'm in California. It's not as humid. Probably most academies out there, you guys have like air conditioning when it gets really hot, right? I don't know, but
my students would quit if I wouldn't put air conditioning.
We have on occasion when it's like 110 degrees out, we'll open the door and turn the air off, and just people walk in and they're like, no, I'm going home.
They are spoiled.
So yeah, that's one thing, you know. So it's just the training environment is just a little bit more difficult, I think, because but that's an adjustment, you know, that of course you can get used to. But other than that, I remember when I was younger, like a teenager training in Brazil, and just the warm-ups alone would just like kill me, you know, and just doing, it was like a fitness class first, you know. So I think the goal was just like to put everybody in really good shape, really top shape, and doing so many push-ups, so many sit-ups, so many jumping jacks, like just regular basic like movement. And I think that culture made its way to the US. But I'm feeling like these days I'll do seminars and it's kind of feeling out what people want. I don't really feel like people really want to do that much warm-up. They just want to get into the drilling. They just want to get into the technique as fast as possible and learn as much as they can, and then spar, right? Most people want to get into the sparring pretty quick, unless they're doing, the fundamentals class where it's maybe more focused on just technique alone. But I feel like it was a lot more the physical side in Brazil. Like you'll leave just drenched, sweaty. Like even if you're just doing a couple rounds, like I said, not just because of the humidity, the heat, but because of the training. And I remember just my dad has a lot of tough guys, but he doesn't raise his students or his school like, you guys are all going to be tough competitors. He's just like, it's something for everybody. You want to compete? Okay, we'll prepare you for that. But, not everybody's, some guys might be like, oh man, this is too intense for me. I don't think I can handle it. So it kind of makes it for everyone. So I kind of came up with that. And then going to Brazil, training at other schools, felt that, they put you on the mat and then you're going to rotate. You're just going to rotate around the mat and who's going to be your next partner every time because it's just going to rotate like a clock around the whole gym and train with everybody. And if you were to step out, you kind of mess up the rotation. You mess up everything,
Well, so you got to finish. You're not taking any rounds off.
Yeah, I remember thinking like, man, I can't step out. I can't take a break. And I think eventually that is going to build some real toughness in you. And sometimes I'll do that as well. But I usually just tell everybody, grab a partner. Okay, switch partners. And then you'll start to see towards the end people sitting on the wall, just kind of taking it easy. I need a break. And I try to motivate people, like, hey, be self-motivating. And even if you're exhausted, go train with someone maybe lighter than you, but keep moving, just don't stop the whole time.
One of the things that I heard, and I don't know if that's true, maybe you can clarify that, but one of the things that I heard that in old school way back, decades ago in the Gracie family, there was no breaks period ever. For the simple fact that you have to defend yourself when somebody attacks you, you don't take breaks. So you have to find the ways of adjusting. You have to find the ways of surviving even in those difficult situations. I mean, that's kind of goes along with what you are saying here, right? You have to go through this whole process and you can rest when it's done.
Yeah. I think there, on that, like there's not just in the academy, but in general, especially that generation, my father's generation, was just, it's something they would say all the time, like anytime, any place, anywhere, like you want to fight right now, let's go. What I mean? You're in the lobby of a hotel, you want to step outside, whatever, like they're just ready to defend anytime, and usually my dad doesn't stretch or anything, before he does a class. I always want to stretch because I feel like injury prevention is huge for injury prevention, just like make a long life of jiu-jitsu as long as you prepare yourself, even in a small way, to light warm up, light stretch before you start, just walk on the mat, shake hands with someone and start going 100%, try to destroy each other. So, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing just to have yourself like that, to think like if someone said, hey, you're ready to compete tomorrow, it's like, well, I'd like to put myself through a training camp, and make sure I have good training partners and get my endurance really good and make sure I'm eating and sleeping like exactly, get myself in good shape. But those guys, they just always want to be ready, which is inspiring because, yeah, they're always just ready. But I think it comes back to a lifestyle. It's like, are you making it a lifestyle? Are you always training? Are you always eating good? Are you keeping yourself in good shape year round? Not just like, okay, it's the season for competition, or I'm going to get myself ready for this competition now, and then the rest of the year I can just do whatever I want, like I'm just kind of like let myself go. So I think people talk about the jiu-jitsu lifestyle a lot. I think that's a part of it, is just kind of like keeping yourself ready all the time.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. What is that life like? We've done a few of these podcasts now, and everybody, that jiu-jitsu lifestyle comes up every time. What does it mean to you? Because I think it means a lot of different things to different people, depending on, where they're from, their age, things like that. So I'm a little interested to see from somebody who's so close to the original, what it means to them.
Other than the philosophical side of like being nice to people, being confident and stuff like that, and whatever jiu-jitsu may provide to enhance your mental state. I think it's also hugely in the physical side where, exactly like I said, I remember when I was like a brown belt and I was like thinking about always competing, and I was like, man, every time I go to compete, I have to think about the weight cut, my diet, and it's kind of like a lot of stress, to just like make that big change in your life. So I remember I was in London one time training with Roger. I was a brown belt. And I was thinking, man, you know what? I'm just going to do this all the time. I'm just going to make it full time, So I'm just going to always eat relatively healthy. I'm not going to go extreme out of shape and then go extreme into shape. I'm just going to kind of keep myself really close to being in shape all the time. And I think that is the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, is taking care of yourself, eating healthy, training regularly, being nice to people, being a good person, being confident in who you are, and just the fact that we constantly are training with different people and testing ourselves. That's something that the average person doesn't always have the opportunity to do. And so, because of that, people are a little more explosive, on edge. People get in fights easier. And I think people in jiu-jitsu are a little bit more chill generally, because they get all of that extra aggression and testosterone out during their training, that they don't really need to feel the need to, I need to test myself against that guy. I have something to prove. We don't have it because we're constantly proving or being proven on.
So now, since we've been off for 3.5 months, how do you think everything that you're saying now with staying in shape, and obviously we don't have these outlets, or we didn't have these outlets for the past 3 months to get the adrenaline and going and get some of that mobility and physicality out, how do you think that returns as we're getting back onto the mat, into the academies, into the gyms? How do you think that's going to play out over the next few months? Do you think people will return? Do you think there will be a hesitance there? Do you think everybody's in the top shape?
I think there's a lot of factors, I think, a lot of people will probably get out of shape, will have already. But some people those who are really embracing the lifestyle, they'll focus on keeping themselves in good shape and find other ways to continue the lifestyle going, Some people will come back stressed out. And I think everybody probably felt a certain amount of stress during this time because of a drastic lifestyle change, unless they had a job that didn't really change for them. But a lot of the people that forced to stay at home or lost financially problems. So jiu-jitsu is a great outlet for that, right? Even if you have the stress, you're coming back and you kind of let all that go. You're with your friends, you're sweating, you're letting out the toxins out of your body, you're distracted, you can't think about anything but what's happening right there in front of you when that guy's trying to choke you. You got to deal with it. So I think people are definitely missing it, and even just a social aspect. So yeah, I think people are coming back. I'm noticing a lot of people just running back to the academy. They're super excited to start, and there is a smaller percentage of people that are hesitant still. They're like, I'm kind of I don't want to be part of second wave if that were to happen. But I think what we're doing here at the academy, I'm trying to be responsible as much as possible. And I'm going to say, if you are going to be training and you're not doing the no contact class, then get with a partner and try to stay with that one partner the whole class, so that, and kind of even stay in the same place on the mat, so that you're limiting your exposure to big groups. Jiu-jitsu is a tough one.
What does your dad say about COVID-19?
My dad is just going back to normal. He doesn't really, when can we go back to normal? And a lot of people say, oh, there might not be going back to normal. There's that normal that we knew is gone. I thought maybe handshaking would be a thing that just becomes a thing of the past, fades away, and but
do you think it will?
Well, when this thing first started, I was thinking, you know, how much people like don't want to touch each other and masks and gloves and everything and social distancing. I was thinking, man, like, imagine if handshaking was something that in 20 years from now they say, remember when people used to shake hands? You know,
Yeah.
people don't shake hands, you know, like they don't touch each other at all. You know,
I have a neighbor who had some surgery done right when this all happened, and she's having a hard recovery. Other neighbors checking in on her, and I met a guy who just lives, 4 houses down for the first time, and we walked right up to each other in the middle of the street, went to shake hands, and then we're like, oh wait a minute, we're not supposed to do this. So we did the elbow bump, to say goodbye too. But yeah, it's definitely new, and I think it's going to be really interesting when we all start. If there isn't a big second wave, when we all start getting back into things, how people are going to react differently to it. I think it's going to be very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
So
thoughts, but
obviously you compete a lot. You are on international stage for jiu-jitsu competition. Do you think competition is coming back this year?
Well, I heard that the federation is not going to be having any more tournaments this year. They just decided, okay, this year we're going to not bring it back, and maybe that's probably the more responsible thing to do in this situation. But there are some tournaments that are still going, and I think people like myself, like, I don't know, I'm more focused on just the academy, getting through this tough time, making sure that students are feeling comfortable, and just kind of just focusing on the roots. Because when I have to go and compete, when I think about competition, I kind of think a little bit more selfish. I think about my time, my training, rest, and food, and just it's like a lifestyle focus, and I don't really like to have too many distractions, and getting the academy through this storm, if you will, is kind of a big distraction, So we'll see, but I'm probably just going to focus on competing again next year, and I think competition is a hard thing to take out of someone's life when they kind of adapt to that style of training, that style of having that regular challenge in your life, So I look forward to coming back.
Do you think you're going to continue competing in a long term? I mean, over the next decade, or are you foreseeing this kind of fading away and you're focusing on the academy and Gracie Allegiance?
I mean, I already have like kind of calmed down competing. Last year, I'd only did 4 tournaments, I believe, and
Is it hard to stop competing?
It's a little bit hard. It's hard to, like, when people say, "Oh, Pan Am's coming, are you competing?" Everybody's gonna say, "You competing? You competing?" And it's like you have to say again and again, "No, not this time," or whatever it may be, And you get that question, and you go to a tournament. When I go to a tournament, everybody's like, "Are you competing? Are you competing this weekend?" No, I'm just coaching. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like kind of like I feel kind of like guilty a little bit to say no, like I should. But slowly things calm down. But I like to still do. I think it's important. I think it's good to challenge ourselves, and get ourselves like fully, see if we can, if it's possible, get yourself in as good of a shape as possible, at least once or twice a year, so we don't just completely let ourselves go too much,
Yeah, I always wondered, how difficult it is for a professional athlete to completely stop the competition factor. And you see this throughout the history, not only in jiu-jitsu, but just professional sports, where, they retire and they come back a few years later, they retire and so the retirement is it's very difficult factor to kind of incorporate into their life. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do it, like you said, and come back. I have probably something in my personality. I have a hard time to say, like, okay, I'm done with this. I quit, or in this case, retire. I think it's hard for me to just ever say something like that. I mean, it could happen, but I think at one point or another, I'm always going to want to find that challenge, or find, that adrenaline, even if I think it's something very special. I think maybe like a few years into black belt, I really started like embracing the feeling, the emotion that you feel before you step on the mat, not just like feeling the anxiety and have it drive you crazy, but really feeling like recognizing how special it is, thinking about the people that go to war over the history of community, of the world, of humans, like fighting, battling. This is a way for us to kind of feel that similar emotion where it's like, I'm about to go head to head with this guy and we're going to battle it out. He's going to try to destroy me. I'm going to try to destroy him. And that's an amazing, we get that in the academy too, right? But it's a little different when you step on the mat, you step on a stage, and, you got all these people yelling for you. You got people yelling against you. It's an amazing situation. And I think the average person won't normally, these days in our time, won't experience that kind of adversity. They'll experience adversity through finances and kind of mental adversity, but that physical, just like guys coming for you, that's something really special. And I think it's something that is very character building as well.
Why do you think a lot of people hesitate to get into the competition state on the beginning, at least, their very first step, their very first tournament? Often you hear it, I'm not ready. I want to wait to X belt. I want to wait until blah, blah, blah. There's several reasons behind it, but why do you think that's so difficult to make that very first step?
I think it's for exactly these reasons, because it is difficult. It is something that, I used to. And I actually really admire like these white belts to come in and they, train for a couple months and they say, hey, when can I compete? When's the competition? And I'm like, man, that's pretty cool that you're just like willing to just, go out there and get yourself into that. I even wonder for myself, like, would I have been as much of a competitor if I didn't feel pressure from like my family and, people around my family saying like, hey, you're gonna compete, right? You'll eventually become a champion or something, like I kind of felt that it was my responsibility,
Was there a pressure from your family?
Yeah. Huge pressure.
That
I'm not just like, I don't think that I'm the average person walking into an academy and, hey, would you like to compete one day? Would you ever consider that? It wasn't like that. It was like, I'm 5 years old and it's like, hey, you see these, uncles of yours, cousins of yours competing, that's going to be you one day. You see the guys in the UFC, that's going to be you one day, So I think like from the very young age, I already knew that was something that I was going to have to do. There's something that I felt that it was my responsibility to like kind of continue defending the name of Jiu Jitsu, the name of the Gracie family. Now the Gracie family is kind of like, I feel like all Jiu Jitsu practitioners represent what the Gracie family have done. So it's not really like, oh, represent your family, it's just, but I don't know. I just felt that from a very young age. So
yeah, I was actually going to ask you that later, but since we're talking about it now, doing Zoom classes with the kids here, and after every class, we have 5 minutes where we talk about a particular topic, and through our curriculum, twice through it, we do jiu-jitsu history. And so I was in the Zoom class the other day. We were talking a little bit about it, and I said that I was going to talk to you this week. And man, like eyes got this big, their jaws hit the floor. It was hilarious. They were just like, what? You're talking to who? And two of the kids actually had questions, and one was what you just touched on. A 9-year-old kid wanted to know if there is pressure being part of that family and what it means. I think, you already explained a lot of it, but I think, for a little kid to be that perceptive, to know who you are, know your family's history, and then to ask a question like that, what is there pressure? His exact question was, is there a lot of pressure being a Gracie? And
That's usually a person that comes from adults.
right, 9-year-old kid, and I've never seen this kid's face light up like this. All of them, some of the little ones who don't really know the history yet, but the 8 and 9-year-olds were stoked that we were going to have this conversation with you, and that was one of the things they wanted to know.
Clark, do you feel a lot of pressure when you compete? Do you feel there's a target on your back just because of the name?
Nowadays, I don't feel as much pressure because after I became black belt, and I was like, okay, Marcelo Garcia is in my division, so if I lose to Marcelo Garcia and I just got my black belt, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You know what I mean? So I felt like a lot more. I felt like the pressure came off a bit when I became black belt, but at the same time, it's more serious, so it's like a different kind of pressure. It's like, okay, you're not purple or brown belt anymore. So, but yeah, I mean, I still feel the pressure, but I tried to like. Can you guys see me still? Something.
Yeah, we're good.
Somebody usually went black, but I still feel pressure, but I feel like I know.
Do you feel that people seek out you particularly? I mean, just to have the accomplishment of competing with a member of Gracie family, or do you think that kind of faded away over time? Is not the same as it was before?
I mean, jiu-jitsu is a lot bigger now. There's a lot more people that are very good at jiu-jitsu. I think in my dad's time, one generation above me, my father's generation, it's like he would always say everybody wants to see Gracie lose, because the Gracies were the guys that were like really hard to beat. Why? Because the whole family spent the entire time refining techniques, being as good as they could be, preparing themselves, and those were like the guys to beat at that time because they knew more than anyone. They were training longer than anyone. But nowadays, like there's a lot of guys that dedicate their life to jiu-jitsu and they live on the mat practically, and all their dream is just to be the best in jiu-jitsu that they can be. So, not all the Gracies think the same way as they used to, and I actually think it's important to have balance in life. But I think it's something pretty cool to challenge yourself, and I really love the idea of looking at myself and thinking like, okay, I'm a professional athlete, right? I'm going out there, I'm treating myself like an athlete and just embracing that life. I thought that was pretty cool. And but I think for the fact that like the generation before us, they talked about so many stories about like being undefeated. Everybody's undefeated, And for me to think like, imagine like you're competing. I think I remember being purple belt and the guy was making like 2 points on me, sweep me or something. And then I started to get this anxiety in the match, like, oh my God, I might lose. There's like only a few more minutes left, So that's not a good feeling, when you're in the middle of the match, So you got to build confidence. What happened to me is I think I built confidence. Even with the guy making 2 points on me, I still realized that I can still win. And you know what? Even if I don't win, it's not the end of the world. The guy I'm fighting, he's really good too. And everybody knows that. So that takes off some pressure. I'm fighting against some of the best guys in the world, at black belt. So I don't feel like, okay, I have to win everything like some of my older generation would say, or would have experienced.
Yeah, I think those are great points that you're making in regards to the change of generations and how things change and the evolution of jiu-jitsu itself. So, Gary, before we wrap up, who are the kids that ask those questions?
So that was Ben, and I don't know if they'll ever listen, but I got to make sure that I tell them at least that I let you know that Ben had that awesome question. And then Zach, you already talked about it, in that same thing. He was just wondering, what it's like to be coming from such a famous family. In our world, it's the most famous family, right? It's not like a movie star family or anything like that most of the population knows about. But in the world that we live in, I mean, it's the one, right? And I think that, it's just so cool that these little guys and girls too, revere you guys so much. And they love what you've done for us and for them. I think it's important that we keep telling them, you know, where it all came from. And, you know, Clark's a big, huge part of that. And like I said, they were super excited to know we were talking to you.
Do you prefer teaching kids or adults?
Do I prefer?
Yeah. Who's harder? Who's more difficult?
Teaching kids, you know, but it takes, I have taught kids and thought like, man, this is actually pretty fun and very rewarding. But I still spend most of my time teaching adults. I don't teach the kids very often, but I think it's great, you know, and I would love to be part of like the journey of a kid that, you know, starts at a young age, you know, like as a teenager or even before, and then becomes like extremely well known, becomes a champion, becomes a great professor, you know, and think like, man, I was part of that kid's journey, or I inspired that kid somehow. I think that's really cool. So, you know, we got to look at the kids, not like, oh, it's just the kids class, whatever. No, this is like the next generation. These are the guys that are going to be beating us up in a few years, and they're going to be on the mat, you know, inspiring the world, you know, pretty soon, you know. So
that's what I would say. I need to be nice to them because they will beat me up just in a few
yeah.
years.
Yeah, makes them like you now, right?
Exactly. Hey, listen, before we wrap up, you mentioned at the end a balance in life, and you and I we've spoken about this a few times, and why don't you share what you mean by that? What do you mean by well-balanced life? You know, especially in jiu-jitsu, we go through these extremes, high and lows, hills and valleys, diet, no diet, competition, hard training, and so on. What is the definition of well-balanced life for you?
Well, I think a lot of jiu-jitsu competitors, for example, they say, all I want is a gold medal. All I want is to be a world champion. And I think that's great. It's great to be driven. But if that's all you're doing and that's all that, it's not really for me, you know. I think the guys that do it and they focus, they deserve it. Like I always think back to like the Meows, you know, the Meow brothers, because they're like, I think, a well-known example of these guys that all they do is they're on the mat all the time, and win or lose, which is usually they're winning, they just go back to the mat and go back to drill the very next day. You know, they don't like, oh, I'm going to take a vacation now, go to the beach. Like they deserve it because they're so focused. But I don't think that people that live with that kind of focus and that kind of dedication probably have very much balance in life overall. Of course, I admire what they do extremely, but I don't think that's something I could do like for life or even for many, many years, you know.
So what's equally important to you besides
think, you know,
training and competition?
Yeah, I think just whatever you like to do, you know, whether it's just being outside, doing something outside, maybe playing a different sport, maybe you know, going to the beach, or you know, doing something maybe outdoors, because we're indoors just generally. Time with family, time, you know, doing other things, and not just having always the same conversation of jiu-jitsu, you know, like talking about other things as well. And I also think that, you know, there are people probably that sacrifice so much, they're so one-sided towards the focus of being the best jiu-jitsu competitor they can be, that they're willing to even put artificial things in their bodies that may not be the healthiest thing for themselves, but they're doing it for that one goal. And I think in the end, jiu-jitsu is not made so you can be a champion. Jiu-jitsu is here not to make us champions. Jiu-jitsu is here to make our lives better. You know, it's to enhance our lives and maybe give us some kind of different perspective or different strength that we don't have. You know, I've had guys come out of addiction and becoming sober and finding jiu-jitsu, guys that just need to be more self-confident, more outspoken, more just comfortable, maybe in social environments, whatever it may be, or just need that fitness in their life, the society, you know. So I think, you know, jiu-jitsu provides a lot of balance already, but I also don't want to, you know, sacrifice my body to the point where I can't enjoy going for a run with my son, or let's take him surfing one day, or whatever it may be, because my body's so beat up from jiu-jitsu, because I focus so much on, on that, So I think it's important to balance out things and not just be over focused on one thing. I think dedication is great, but we can also get burnt out, right? You see a lot of guys just kind of come into the scene, over focus on one thing, and they might not even like it anymore, really. They just do it because they're just like so determined, but do you really enjoy what you're doing? So I think, I remember talking to Shanji one time, Ibero, about after Worlds or right before Worlds. It's like, man, I don't even want to see my gi anymore. I don't even want to look at my gi, because I've been training so much. And, that's okay. You spend like a camp training for the event, but to do that 100% of the time, imagine if that was your life 100% of the time, you don't have a social life or anything. I think it's important for us to spread out our mental energy a little bit.
Great thoughts. I think great stories. Clark, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing all this with us. Not only from the history going way back to your childhood, but also to your philosophy on life and competition. I think there will be a lot of listeners who actually will appreciate the thoughts and your preparation to life. I mean, just your outlook. So thank you for that. How can we find you? Where can people find you? Where can people find more about Gracie Allegiance, about your association, about your academy, and you personally?
Yeah, you can go onto gracieallegiance.com or clarkgracie.com. I'm also on Instagram, just my name, Clark Gracie. And I just released this year for the first time an instructional DVD with IBJJF Fanatics called Automatic Omoplata. So people want to know about the omoplata all the time when they talk to me, and that's one of my specialties. So that's, when they look at towards learning more of my techniques, this is probably a special one.
You were a wizard in that. I know that.
I love jiu-jitsu. I love the technique, and I always love to talk to people. I love to travel and do seminars, and hear different people's perspective on jiu-jitsu, and see how people are training in different places too. I always learn a little bit everywhere I go, so always happy to talk to people and share jiu-jitsu. So yeah, available in any of these ways.
Gary,
Sweet.
before we wrap up.
I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for sharing with us, taking your time out of your day. Good luck with the academy reopening and with the kids coming back on the mat and everything. I hope everybody stays safe. We're looking forward to it. So keep sharing how it's going. So if we can pull any nuggets out that we can use too to make sure that our reopening goes smoothly as well. So thank you very much.
Right on.
Thank you, Clark.
Great talking.
Take care.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to ROL Radio. Check out all future episodes on our website and all major podcast platforms. Take care.